Hello, world.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
It's like I've forgotten how to say hello. Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Life with Kaka. I'm your host and fellow producer, Carolina Groppa. It has been a minute since I've been able to get you guys an episode, and I do apologize for that. It really bums me out, but sometimes my schedule just gets away from me, and then I get sick on top of it. Such is life. Such is Kaka. But here we are. This week I sat down with Natalie Metzger. She was a dancer before she ever set her foot in the world of filmmaking. A detail I find pretty cool. She freelanced for a while before finding her home at Vanishing Angle as the VP of Development and Production. Natalie truly beams with happiness over how much she loves her job, despite the challenges. And given that this documentary that I've been working on, which is very cool, about women in comedy, has been in the height of its production, I have been a bit tired and exhausted, and so this conversation was a great reminder of why I do what I do. It also reminded me to find time for self-care, to rest, something I'm not very good at most of the time. I know. I'm a work in progress too, you know. It's comforting that in talking about our Kaka, the show has somehow become like therapy for me at times. And for some of the guests, that's the feedback they've given me. Has it for you? I hope so. Well, let's dig in and hear from Natalie. We met through Claire, where we were connected through Claire.
Yeah.
Right? You guys went to school together?
Yeah, we went to Cal Arts.
To Cal Arts?
Yeah, which is where I went to grad school for dance, actually. I have a master's in choreography.
I think that's actually really cool. When I was like doing my research on you, to me, it's like the best producers were artists first.
Yeah, totally.
So I was curious how much that identity has informed who you are today as a producer, and even when you started in your journey to get here, which I really want to dig into, like how you've been able to navigate that.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of just totally fell into producing and into film in a way. I was making these works for the stage. There were these like experimental kind of physical theater, dance theater pieces. And I would, produce them and direct them and write them and choreograph them. And I would work on them for months and months and rehearse with the dancers and get all prepared and get the show up and running. And the shows did well. Like they got awards. They got commissioned to go to different theaters. But I would put in all this work and then it would be up for like 3 weekends or 4 weekends. And, if it was in a theater in like Santa Monica, let's say, no one from the East Side would be able to come. It's like anyone within a 10-mile radius only.
Right.
And so I hated how ephemeral it was. Like I wanted something that like lasted, that I could share with people, like, all around the country. So I started filming my choreography. So I took my dancers, brought them to like interesting locations like that just have like really cool visuals, and just filmed the choreography there. And I had bought a DSLR camera, and so I just kind of like taught myself how to use it. I'd taken an editing class in college, and so I edited those things together and started sending those off to festivals, and they started doing well. They got some awards. They like, played a bunch of places. And so I started just doing more of those, and through doing that, started doing music videos and commercials, which are kind of very similar to dance films in many ways. It's like cool visuals with like fun music or whatever. Yeah. And I also got hooked up with Women in Film, and so I started working on their PSA program. So I started as a producer, and then started directing, and then eventually was executive producing on their business affairs committee. And so I was just getting a lot of on-set experience. And my friends from the film school at Cal Arts started asking me to help them make their films. They're like, "Oh, can you help me make my film the way you made your film?" And I was like, "Sure." And I'd always produced the like, physical theater shows. Like I was, doing all that stuff. And so I knew how to do a budget, and I knew how to book vendors, and I knew how to negotiate with crew and all that stuff. And so I did. So I started helping my friends do it, and then they would tell their friends, and it was a total word of mouth thing. And then eventually people started paying me to do it. They're like, "Oh, we'll pay you this much to come on and produce." And I was like, "Oh, cool. Like I can get paid to do this." I just kind of built up from there. And then I started doing features and then series. And then I met Matt Miller at Vanishing Angle and started producing stuff here. And and then the work here started getting so consistent, and started doing more features here that now I'm the VP of production and development here.
That's a
Vanishing Angle.
very like concise nutshell like summary of everything. I'm so grateful. Thank you. But I do want to go back because I want to talk a little bit about the transition from when you discovered that producing was like a viable career path and you had been doing choreography, and it sounds like up until that point maybe you had the skills that one would now quantify as like a producer, but at the time you didn't really know it. So when you were going through that transition, did you feel sad? Was there a loss of like, oh, I'm not going to do that anymore. Now it's taking me here?
No, I mean, it was like, it felt so natural and organic to everything that I've been doing. And yeah, I mean, like it was kind of this interesting discovery. I think it was when people started paying me to do it that I was like, oh, this is like a position that people do.
Yeah.
Before it was just like, oh, I'm just going to help my friend, and they're giving me the title of producer because it just like made the most sense for what I was doing. And then when people were like, cool, like, and we're going to give you this fee, and I was like, oh, right, like this is a thing. And the more that I learned about it, like I just like started digging in more, and that's like why I wanted to get hooked up with women in film, and like why I wanted to work with all these different organizations. It was like I want to learn everything about this.
Yeah.
But I've always had kind of an OCD brain. I've always been the kind of person that like loves like spreadsheets and color coding and budgets and like I actually really enjoy it. And I do find it to be extremely creative. I mean, you're constantly creatively problem solving. And so, yeah, it didn't feel as much like a transition as just like, oh, I'm going to do this now. And this is like so interesting and cool. And I want to learn all about it. And I do feel like coming from the perspective of being someone that was directing for the stage and then also being a director who directed commercials. And I do a lot of documentary work and I'm now actually starting to direct narrative more that I feel like it really enhances what you can be as a producer. If you have like the skill set that I knew what I wanted in a producer for both the stage and for film that I never really thought that I had. And so...
and what was that? What was it that you wanted?
Oh, God, that's like the best question ever. I don't know. Like just, it's like you want something that doesn't exist, but like you want someone that's like always there and always available, that like can like support you through the like the insanity of the process, because it's such an insane process. Who has their shit together so that like nothing falls through the cracks, who's always communicating but is always like nice to be around, and who people want to work for, and like who can like lead the troops, and also someone who can be a sounding board for creative to like bounce ideas off of, or who can like help guide if there's like maybe something that doesn't work within the budget, or maybe it's just like a producer's like seen that not work before, and it's just like, hey, I just want to flag this as like something that you might want to reconsider or think about. I just like wanted to have that person, and so then it was very easy to be that person because I knew what I would want in that position. And I love producing, and I still direct some, but like I would never want to stop producing.
So producing still gives you that fire. You don't feel like when you get to step into the role of just producer and it's someone else is sort of steering the ship, right? As the director, you're not like, I could do it this way. Like you don't have those thoughts.
I love producing. I love being a facilitator for people. I love. It feels very maternal for me. It's like very much like nurturing. I feel like the director is, this person that I'm just like so excited to be there for. Like the director-producer relationship is so like a spouse. It's so like a marriage.
You said in another interview that it was like being a midwife, which I thought was like a really good description.
Yeah, it really is, because I mean, you're like helping this person through one of the most like traumatic experiences of their life.
Yes.
And the like the thing that they are giving birth to is like not like yours necessarily, but like it is so important that it exists, and you're helping make that come into life. And so it really does feel like that.
I've used the childbirth metaphor often on this show, because while I don't have children of my own, I often say that if like production is like labor, you know, and then you have the baby and then you're like, oh my God. And 2 years later, you're like, it's so cute. And then you forget like
amnesia.
how birth was and the pregnancy.
Totally real thing.
And then you're like, maybe
Matt
we'll
talks
have
about that a lot. Yeah, he's always like, there's like birth amnesia. That's like production.
You forget, you know, you just forget the battle of production. And I obviously don't mean to, I've never been to real battles, so I can't like speak on that. It's kind of insanity what we do. And it sounds like you came up doing a lot of physical production and wearing all the hats and learning as you went, which is very similar to my journey. I've not directed anything, but it's fascinating to me to hear that you've dipped your toe in sort of all sorts of ponds in this industry and like the creative side of it, because you also write and you've directed not just one type of thing, multiple things. You've done commercials and music videos, like you said, and docs and out narrative, which is so exciting. We need more women directing, yes. But to still be like a cheerleader as a producer for others, like it sounds like you are, is like a really refreshing, I think, a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, I mean, if given the choice, I would still like, I would probably produce like 75 to 80% of the time. And then, I mean, I love directing. There are definitely like stories that I want to tell. I think I'll always come back to producing. Just there's something that I just really enjoy.
What is it that you love about it?
I don't know. It's I love speed. I love moving fast. There's something about producing that's like it's a race. Like you are just constantly moving quickly and you have to just get it all done. And there's something that's like it's almost like a game in a way. It's like how many emails can I get through? Like how many like cells in the spreadsheet can I like fill out? Like it's fun and you get to do it. I mean, at least here, like I get to do it with friends and people that I love and respect, and it's a magical experience. When you're directing, you're very isolated, and you kind of have to be in order to like kind of keep your vision and not get kind of distracted with like all the things that can, you know, make it go sideways, whether it's like a producing issue or like a crew issue or whatever. Like you kind of have to just isolate yourself. But producing is like very different. Like it's so interpersonal, and so like you just have to be able to deal with all sorts of different people.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
Do you ever get overwhelmed by all of it?
Yeah, sometimes, when I've taken on too many projects and realized that, that there's no way to not work, 14 hours every day for 7 days a week for a very long time. Yes. And I like look into the future. I'm like, cool, I can have a break from that in like 6 months. Yeah. Then it can be sometimes overwhelming.
Well, and how many projects is that? Like, what's the metric for you?
Yeah. Like, I mean, right now there's like a few too many, but we're like about to finish a couple. But like we have this feature in post-production right now. It's a film called The Werewolf. That it's Jim Cummings' second feature. And then we're shooting this feature documentary about Yogi Berra.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's for fun. And then I'm producing and directing this like short documentary. I'm just finished a short that I directed. We're releasing Greener Grass, which I produced. I was at Sundance earlier this year. Thank you. Yeah, we release October 18th.
Around the corner.
Yeah. And then we're shooting Jim's third feature in less than 4 weeks, and I'm producing that and also first ADing it.
So that's like 8 things.
It's a lot. It's a lot. I feel like I probably took on one too many things, but it's also great, because like again, like all the filmmakers that I'm working with are people that I absolutely adore. So that's just fun to just get to be around them all the time. I don't know, like it's a lot of time, but it's also, it doesn't feel like work, or it's, I don't know, it's just like all part of hanging out, like I'd probably just be here doing this if it was the weekend, I mean, I do all the time, but
so you don't feel like it consumes your life and then you don't have time for other things that fill your well, whatever they may be.
Yeah, I mean, there's one thing, I wish I had more time to exercise. That's like one thing, like taking care of your body and your health. That's something that I find and have also found in the past is like one of the first things that I start to ignore. I'm just like, I'm just gonna put my face to the grindstone and just like get the work done, and then it's like, oh cool, like I'm getting sick. I mean, especially coming up in the dance world, like I can feel when I haven't exercised and like haven't been in my body. And so that's something that I'm trying to actively be like, okay, well, I have to at least set aside time to go for a run or like go take a dance class or something.
Well, I was going to ask you, I find it so fascinating because it's like we spend most of our lives now in modern society, like in our heads and living like chest up, like we're all here, and most people are not in tune with their bodies. And I'm a yogi, so that's like why I say that. When I'm in crazy production mode and I can't make a yoga class, I can't take care of my body. And I didn't come up dancing or anything. I wasn't athletic, but now it's at a place where if I don't have that, make that time to reconnect, it starts to have all sorts of other effects, you know, like even when I was just in New York last week, like I had to find one yoga class that I could take just to like pause, because our brains are going so much, and it's an overstimulation left and right, not just with the work we do, but with life and everything that's in your face. And like reconnecting to your body is so important. So I'm glad to hear you say that. Yeah. And that's important to you. And I hope you're finding time for it.
I'm trying to. It's like still like a struggle to do it. Like I'm still trying to like find the time and like and actually like make the space for it, but I'm getting there. I'm like I've started going like on more runs, and I'm going to try to start taking a dance class every now and then. But The Mind Explained is like one of my like new favorite shows. I absolutely love this show. They were just talking about like how the research shows that prepping for an SAT test, actually like the more that you study doesn't help, but like the best thing that they've found is actually like meditating beforehand like makes the scores go up more than like any other thing. There's something about like actually clearing the brain that can make you remember things better. And so that is just something good to remember, that sometimes when speed is the thing and when you're trying to like move so quickly and just get through all the things and get through all the to-dos, you can kind of forget that actually like taking a moment just to breathe can actually make everything go faster.
Yeah. I often feel like I blink and like, whoa, 6 months have passed, and like, whoa, I'm a year older. Like it's like you're on this nonstop roller coaster, and I feel like you're at times exhilarated and it's the best ride of your life, and other times like you're vomited all over yourself and you don't have time to get off and like clean up. You just gotta keep going.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly.
But most of the time you're not like sick to your stomach. You're just like enjoying the ride along the way. But if you had to define a producer, how would you define one?
Oh gosh. I mean, I do feel like a midwife for like the visual medium is like kind of the best way I can think to describe it. I mean, it's like a producer is the person that has to make it happen, you know, like the word produce is like to make happen, to take action. And so to me, at the end of the day, like the producer is the one that's responsible to get it made and to help facilitate the director's vision to make it happen with whatever resources you're given, in some way, shape, or form, to have a finished product at the end of the day, that somehow resembles what the director was intending to do. I don't know. Like I like very much believe in like producing as a verb. It's, you know, like leading from the trenches of like, you know, not this kind of ivory tower thing, but rather like, like being down in the trenches, like with everyone and like helping make it happen. You know, there's not, if we need to get a shot done and like something needs to be like picked up or like trash needs to be swept, like I'm like right there with the PAs if needed, like to get the job done, because like, you know, we're all in this together and it's like a team. And,
I think there is a perception of producers that is not real. It's part of why I wanted to start the podcast, is because I think in having these conversations, you get to see the through lines of the kinds of people, the kinds of humans who are drawn into this. And time and time again, no matter what the path has been or where someone is today, I find that it's just people who love that community and that team building. And like, it really is like moving from A to B and getting everybody there safely and fed and like hydrated and moving the troops around, you know? And I think that's a beautiful thing. But do you feel like there are misconceptions that people have of producers or of you? Have you felt that in the past? I
mean, I think producing, like it's something that I talk with a lot of my fellow producer friends about is like the producer credit is like one of the most diluted ones. And so it's like the most confusing to the general population, because like I hear all the time, okay, I know what a director does, I know what a cinematographer does, I know what an editor does, like, but what does a producer do? Like, what is your day to day? And I think it's because there are so many types of producers and so many different kinds of producers that get the same credit, which is where it's confusing, and where I hope like the PGA with the PGA mark is going to start kind of helping to differentiate that, but yeah, like there are definitely the producers that are like just financiers, and then there are producers that are more on the ground, but they might just sit at monitor and just give feedback. And then there are producers that are line producers that can just like do the budget and do kind of like the more logistical things. But then there are producers that can kind of do everything, and that's like the kind of producer that I try to be, like the kind of producer where I can sit at monitor and give creative feedback, but I'm also building the budget and like filling in the gaps of wherever the crew has dropped the ball if needed, and helping to find financing if needed, and giving notes on the script and like helping develop it from like the ground up. It's tough because all of those different people with all those different job descriptions all sometimes just get a producer credit. And so it's like, it's hard to define for, I think, the general population, because they're like, oh, right. So like a producer's like the money person. And it's like, yeah, sometimes.
Yeah.
And sometimes not. And sometimes like not at all. And sometimes like what does money mean? Like, does that mean like getting the money, or does that mean like managing the money? Like those are very different things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jerry Weintraub, he was one of the first books I read about producing, and he had this great quote that I'm completely saying out of context about how when producing began, when the film industry began, a producer was one person. Like, it was one person who was with the project from start to finish, inception to death, and that was it. Mm-hmm. And somewhere along the way, we've compartmentalized all of the different segments of producing. And maybe that was to create more jobs. I don't know. Maybe it was because of unions and the DGA and like, okay, we're going to have a person who runs and manages the production. And whatever the case may be, it's so separated now that people specialize in these different areas. But there's rarely the old school, what I call the soup to nuts producer who is with the project from inception and sees it all the way through post, It's just so interesting how it continues to evolve. And now with like streaming and all of these things, and content creators also being producers of their own content, it's just like the title has become even more convoluted and even more challenging to explain. And it does frustrate me a little bit because I think it dilutes what we do. Mm-hmm. It takes it and says, oh, well, like anybody can do that.
Yeah.
And the perception that people have, and even myself, like when I started and I would see producers at monitor, I was like, oh, like that's what you do. Like you roll up to set, like 5 hours after call, and you have a Starbucks cup and you sit at monitor and you listen to the thing on the context and you give notes and you leave and you make dinner, And I was like, that's cool. That's not what I'm doing. So how do you get there, But you have not felt this sort of like eye of misconception towards you specifically in your journey.
No. I mean, I almost have only worked through word of mouth. And so I don't think there's ever been like a weird misconception about what I bring to the table, like mostly just because like through word of mouth, it's like, oh, well, this is what Natalie does. And they'll explain to the person, like, this is the kind of producer that she is. I think it's interesting. A friend of mine, a producer friend of mine, she was in a meeting with a director, and the director was like meeting with someone that like was potentially going to like throw in a little bit of money. It wasn't like a big amount. And they were like, yeah, and you can have like a producer credit. And they said that in front of her, and she's the producer, in like, in this meeting, and she had to pull them aside afterwards and be like, hey, like, how about we give them a director credit? And they were like, whoa, like you can't give them a director credit. And she's like, why is it okay to just give them a credit for like what I'm doing, it's like related to like the money of it, right? Of like, well, you can just like give someone a producer credit, if they give some money, and it's the same thing as someone like spending like months of their life, trying to like get this thing made every day for 14-hour days. So that is like a thing that is tough, but I really appreciate the Producers Guild trying to take that on, and like the PGA mark I think is a really great way to differentiate like who are the
Right.
Who's producers.
And the PJ mark, for people listening who may not know, is essentially a denotation that the PJ started giving to really find out who physically made the movie. So what they'll do is they'll call like crew members, they'll call people who worked and ask who was a producer on set, like who was the person that you answer to, who was interfacing with you every day. And that typically is considered the person who gets the PJ mark, would be the produced by credit, as opposed to just a producer credit.
Yeah. And it's like beyond just like the crew, is also like talking to the director to be like who was working with you on the script, is like talking to the editors, like to figure out like who was working through post, like who, like it's everyone. And so it's like not something that can just be hidden, you know, it's like.
Yeah. And it's only one person that can get it, right?
No, it can be multiple.
Okay.
But yeah, so it's like essentially anyone that is getting a producer credit on the film gets like submitted. The Producers Guild actually reaches out to, you know, the director, the writer, the editor, and then like the UPM. There's like a whole like list.
Yeah,
I've
been reached out to before.
Yeah. And they essentially like give the list of like all the people. It's like, what was your interaction with each of these people? And sometimes I've had crew reach out to me and be like, hey, like I don't know how to answer this because like I don't know, like I don't recognize a couple of these names, like I haven't never even heard of them, like and I'm like, yeah, you can just say that.
Say that, yeah.
So yeah.
And you were freelance for a long time, and then you've been here in-house now at Vanishing Angle for how long?
So I started working at Vanishing Angle about 4.5 years ago, but I was still freelance. I was just doing, you know, projects here and there with them. And then I became the VP of the company earlier this year.
Ooh, congrats.
Yeah, thanks.
What was that transition like?
It was really organic. I mean, I was already doing so many projects out of here. And even like when projects would come to me from outside of the company, I would still try to like run them through VA just because it made it easier. And like, and I really trust the team here a lot. And we also have like post facilities. And so even like if a project was produced outside of it, you know, we would like run post through here or something like that. We made this movie. It's a, you know, studio negative pickup, and it had like some bigger budget earlier this year. And as we were all on set together, and we were talking about like what we wanted to do with the company, what we wanted to do in the future. And we were all just like talking as a team of like, and, you know, and I was giving suggestions of like, well, we could do this with the company. And like, what if we did a new logo, or what if, you know, like we just like would talk about kind of like the strategy for the company as a whole. And it just kind of made sense to, have me come on in a more like official capacity.
So you were never like just on the freelance grind, and then it was like, oh, I'm going to go in-house now. I'm tired of the freelance life. I want to find a home.
No, it was much more like organic of like, well, you're kind of always here anyway. Like, why don't we just make this more
like you
official?
Don't leave.
Yeah.
We'll just invite you.
It was like, we're dating. We can just like go ahead and get married. It's okay.
And how's married life so far?
It's been amazing here. Vanishing Angle is a really special place. Like there's a family atmosphere here that's is extremely supportive, and we constantly work with the same crew and creatives, and so we become like a really tight-knit community. You know, we do like a weekly writers group that everyone is able to attend, and we have everyone from like actors and production designers to directors and producers that all come for that.
Yeah.
We do monthly movie nights. We try to do monthly group hikes where we, you know, it's just like we do a lot of culture building. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, and like the projects are really great. We've so far been having good success.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is because the company is built on the idea that we do both commercials and films, and the commercials are the thing that pays the overhead and helps us like give the creatives a working wage and helps us like give crews like great rates. And so then when we do the indie films, there's not a financial burden on them of like, this has to do well for the company to sustain. And so it allows us to take a lot of creative risks with the films. Yeah. And then like the crews from like our commercials are willing to do minimum wage on the indie film because they know that we're going to get them a great rate on the next commercial.
Yeah.
And they work pretty consistently with us. And also because of our track record with the indie films, they know that it's most likely going to do like well at a festival or get some attention. And so, it's just like a really, really great, I get to make movies with my friends. It's kind of the best.
Awesome. You talked a lot about in other interviews I read about this idea of finding your tribe, which I love because I very much subscribe to it. But I'm curious, like what what was that process like for you of finding your tribe, and how do you recommend to someone listening how they go about finding their own tribe?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. It's a little bit of trial and error. Like I found that I had to just like work on a lot of projects, like work with a lot of different kinds of people. And I started to recognize there were like some people that I worked with that I'm like, oh, well, I'm never going to work with that person again. And like they like are create a very toxic environment, or like, or, you know, or people are like, where, well, that, you know, that was fine. Like, you know, we had a great working relationship, but like, you know, there like wasn't like a chemistry or like, you know, a spark. And then there were people that you just like work with, you kind of like fall in love with your like directors. Like, I mean, I have like, for example, Jocelyn and Dawn, who are the directing team behind Greener Grass. And I did a short film with them as well called The Arrival. They're just such incredible women. They are like smart and talented and beautiful and so funny and so weird. Like they create like the like most strange things in their brains. And I love them to death. And so like I love working with them. I love helping them create their crazy worlds. And then Jim Cummings, like I love producing for him. Like he is he has such an authenticity to his performances, and like he will make you laugh and he will make you cry like all within 30 seconds. And his approach to filmmaking is like, so like, let's just do it. We're just going to go make it happen. It doesn't matter who's going to give us permission. And so I just love working with him and watching how he interacts with actors, and watching how he directs himself, because he's in a lot of the things that he directs. And then like other filmmakers that I've worked with, like Kelly King, who directed a YouTube Red series that we did called Game Lab, and there's just like so many amazing people. You can just feel when someone clicks, and then when you find that click, you just like try to work with them over and over and over again. Someone asked me like, oh, well, should I take this job? I don't know, like it doesn't pay well, but like the director's really cool. And I'm like, if the director's cool and it's a cool project, like don't worry about the money, because like the money will come eventually if it's a cool project, and you're just going to be happier doing a project that like with someone that you believe in. Yeah. And most likely those are going to be the more successful things that are going to like lead to the better, you know, more successful or like, you know, more profitable career in the long run anyway. Yeah.
Well, because if it's a relationship business, you know, then what are you investing in? If you're here to just get rich, then like you've chosen the wrong business. Totally. As producers, like we don't send our resume out, really. It's mostly word of mouth. I often say like who you are off set is no different than who you are on set. Like they are the same person. You know, there isn't the separation of identity. So the way you lead your life is just you, and that's intrinsically yours. And so I always say, find the people that like whatever that is about you that is intrinsically you, and invest in those relationships. And regardless of the outcome, right? Because nobody knows what's ahead for any of us. At least the journey will be so much more worthwhile, because that's the only thing you can control. It's no different than production. Like the only thing you can control is the experience, because you don't know how it's going to cut together. Right. All of the things that are sort of like the magic of filmmaking that either works or doesn't work. But in the moment of making the thing, when you're in the trenches, all you can control is the experience. So can you be kind? Can you be gracious? In the face of like some not easy stuff, you know? And I think that's what separates, my opinion, like the really good producers from the producers who give other producers a bad rep, you know, who yell and scream and are abusive. And I believe we're entering a new wave of people who subscribe to that approach. And it's awesome. It's been really great to see that.
Yeah. I mean, it's so easy to show gratitude. It's like literally the easiest thing. Like saying thank you on set goes such a long way, and people can feel whether they're respected or not. And, you know, for me, like it's all about the long-term relationships. Like I want to be working with the same crew for decades. I want to be like working with the same directors for decades. Like there's, it's about creating that like long-term relationship, and some of the basic things of like helping create that and like creating the tribe is respect, you know? And I have seen other producers who clearly have no respect for any of the people around them. Like they're just seen as stepping stones to something else, whether it's like fame or fortune or whatever. And yeah, like, I mean, it kind of goes back to this idea of like, it's all about the journey, there's something worthwhile in the process of filmmaking itself. And there's something worthwhile about that family that is created. Yeah. And even if it's brief, it's like the, 2 months or 2 weeks, whatever it is for like creating that project, like that is a thing that like was created together with this like team of people. Yeah. And there's something really special and magical about that. And when everyone feels respected and feel like they're part of something kind of bigger than themselves and that they couldn't do alone, there's I don't know, like it's a high.
Yeah, there's nothing better than that. I think that's why we do it. It's like to back up to the childbirth metaphor. The baby finally comes out, and everyone I know, every woman I've known who has had a baby talks about that euphoria that you feel after, and it's very short lived. But I think as filmmakers, we feel that when it goes well, even like on a 2-day shoot, sometimes you can feel that on totally. Like a commercial. You'll be like, I can't believe this is over. Like it's like you're so filled with gratitude and appreciation. And I think it's important to come back to that because we are very privileged to get to do what we do and to be a part of shaping stories and perspectives worldwide. You never know the impact the thing you're making is going to have on a person that maybe you'll never meet and you'll never know. Yeah. And that's okay. Yeah. So anyway, I tend to like philosophize and get like very
but it's like so true. That's like the power of film, and it's like why it excites me so much more than I think theater ever did, is because like the impact that it can have. Like, I mean, it's global and it exists, or hopefully like forever. I mean, like people, will continue to like watch that film or that show or whatever it is, and we'll get something out of it. I mean, I have films from like 5 or 6 years ago that I sometimes still get messages about that like this changed my life. There's something so important and kind of crazy how influential it can be, like just this like thing that we do that's sometimes kind of thrown together, but like it can really like shape a person just by like watching something.
But switching gears, when you have had difficulties or challenges that you've been up against or hurdles since the beginning of your career, maybe things weren't going in a way that you thought or planned or hoped, or you've gotten frustrated and maybe felt like giving up. I don't know if you've ever had that darkness. I ask because I have, and I go through it often. And in fact, to be perfectly honest, because I have freelanced for so long, and sometimes you get a little lost in just like the shuffle of not having a tribe a little bit. And so I'm curious if there is some version of that in your narrative so far in your journey, and if so, like how you've pushed through.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely been either a person involved that that doesn't have that kind of respect for for other people, and you can kind of feel it, and there's no way to really get around it, and that has sometimes like just creates like a darkness of like, why am I doing this again?
Like what's the point?
And then I've also like struggled with when I've like kind of taken on too much. And I'm also the kind of person, I'm never the one to be like, oh, well, that's not my job. Like I'm always the one that like dives in and takes on other things or like other positions. If someone has dropped the ball, I'm like, oh, I can do that too. And sometimes I'll take on so much that I'm just not getting enough sleep for the human body to continue, and it can just like literally make sleep deprivation cause like really crazy things. I feel like I've gotten through both of those things through like, I think, leaning back into the tribe. I sometimes have to remind myself that I can ask for help, and that's okay. I think as a producer, you like do whatever you can to make it happen, and like you kind of take it on, and especially if you were like one of the solo producers on a project, that like you forget that you have this like whole support network of like other producers and just other people and loved ones, and that want to help. So I don't know. And also just powering through it, like knowing that there's going to be like, cool, like it's going to be over in a little bit,
Would you say you're an anxious person?
Yes, sometimes. I feel like more so when I haven't been exercising.
I see a common like.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's like kind of in the nature of the producer to like always worry about like the worst case scenario, to always like go through like, okay, well, like what if this happens and this happens, and like let's plan for this. And I think there's kind of like a built-in anxiety in just the job description. But I also try to trust in like the work and the people around me, and not get caught up in that.
I've observed this commonality of the kinds of people who end up choosing producing in some way or another, having that same quality of anxiety and being so great at problem solving and finding solutions for problems that don't exist yet sometimes. Yeah. And I often wonder how that bleeds into their personal lives, if at all.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, luckily I have almost all my friends are in the industry and also like work at this company, which is helpful. But yeah, like my husband is also in the industry. He's a composer. Nice. And we also write together and also co-direct together. And so like he also gets it. So like everyone in my life is like
gets it.
Yeah. There's also something about getting to like work with your partner that can just make it so much better, you know, like it's not only can you like, you're not missing out on time with them, but they're like helping you make the thing happen, you know, in whatever way. Yeah. So I don't know, that's how I feel like I've gotten around it. I love it. I love being able to be like, what are we having for dinner? Also, what did you think about this version in the like, you know, of the script? Like, can we change this scene? And like, have you seen the newest cut? I don't like the VFX, but like, you know, or whatever it is, like there's something, I like being able to switch to like back and forth from that. Cause like to me, like I don't separate my personal life from my work life. And sometimes like that's like a lot, but like, but it also means for me that like I'm also like never working in a way, or like, you know, we're always working, just because it's, I don't know, it's all the same. But if you kind of in my mind, like if I approach it as this is all like just my life, that I just like being around these people and doing these things. Yeah.
Well, it seems like you're very in control of that, you know, like you've curated this life for yourself and now you get to live it, and that's amazing. You know what I mean? I think like that people may look at what you're describing and say, oh, that's the goal to get to that place, and you've already like arrived there. And so, you know what I mean? To someone else's perspective, of course, we never arrive. Everybody's on their own struggle and journey. But like that is really refreshing to hear, because I know a lot of other producers I've spoken to have felt very beaten down by this industry and by the compromises that they have to make in other parts of their lives. Like older women that I've spoken to who had to make that choice between their career and having a family and being a mother, and all of these like realities of being a woman with a biological clock.
Hopefully it doesn't have to be a choice. I just read this book and I forget the name of it, but it was essentially these like interviews with like the best scientists in their fields. And so it was like the best neuroscience and the best astrophysicist. And like, and one of them was this woman, and she's like at the top of her field. I forget which field it was. And, you know, she's in her like 60s or 70s at this point. And the interviewer asked her, you know, like, you know, you chose not to have kids. Like, you know, do you ever regret the decision, or like, you know, or why? And she was like, well, I never thought I had the time, you know, like it was never an option in my mind because I didn't have the time. And she was like, looking back, I totally could have, like, I would have figured it out. I would have made it work, and like, it wouldn't have affected where I got to. Like you can kind of find like the moments. She was like recommending to the women that were studying under her. She was like, if you want to have kids, like don't not have kids because of the work, because like you will find a way to make it work. And I thought that was like really interesting and like inspiring from a woman who's at the top of her field, you know, in her 60s and 70s, to like have that perspective, especially in today's day and age. There are like ways to work, but like, I mean, it's something that like we talk about at Vanishing Angle of like, well, like, you know, we should have like an ability to have daycare on like set, and and how do we like make sure that, you know, we can work with mothers, like there shouldn't be a reason that like our DP who recently had a baby can't like have the baby like strapped to her, like while she's, coordinating whatever. And
I think even like just regular crew members too, like some people will not take a job because if the rate isn't at the right amount, it doesn't pay for their babysitter that they need to pay for to do the job, So I think creating that space, I'm very excited to see how we as like a industry can create that, because I think there is the space for it. There's another producer I talked to who is a new mom, and she was saying that there are already these like pop-up daycares that are like trailers, and you just pay and they just roll up on set and you just drop off your kids and they're on set with you the whole time, Like there's got to be a way to create that. Like we create all of this other crazy ass stuff for a living. Yeah. So to create an environment where you can have your kids, like that should be that much harder. Yeah.
Totally. It also makes the work better. If that person is like the most talented at their position and you wanted to hire them, whether they have a kid or not, they are going to want to be like more on set. They're going to be more focused if they're not worrying about like their kid back at home. And I mean, and it's hard. And like, in productions, like the budgets are like getting even crazier. So like, I understand the struggle, but I also think that there are like creative solutions that we haven't even like
explored,
thought of.
Yeah. I agree 100%. You kind of talked a little bit about this, but self-care for you, is that just physically moving your body, or are there other ways that you try to practice self-care that keeps you sort of grounded and keeps your compass sort of in check when you do get overwhelmed, when there is a lot aside from your tribe and the people you can lean on? Is there something that is very sort of, just yours that you do for you?
Yeah, I think a lot of it goes back to physicality in a way. Like here at the office, like what I'll do is I'll go for like a walk around like the neighborhood just to like clear my head and to like just physically move, get like blood flowing. And I often find that at like during that walk that I'll like come up with like a solve for whatever thing I was like trying to figure out. Yeah. Just kind of like will all of a sudden pop into my head. But yeah, like going for runs. I love doing yoga. I haven't done yoga in like years, but that was always such a centering thing to me that I'd love to get back into doing. And like same thing with like dance. Like I haven't been in a dance studio in like way too long. But like yeah, there's something about like moving the body, like the body in motion, and it can somehow clear the head and allow it.
100%. I don't know if you've ever read The Body Keeps the Score, but it's all about how there's trauma stored in our bodies and all the ways in which movement and movement therapy helps people. But yeah, it's like I 100% believe it. Okay, but I have a few more questions. What do you think creates career longevity?
Interesting. I feel like to me it's all about the people. And so I do feel like there is like a like required people skills of being able to interact with people, support people, also to deal with difficult people. That's like a required skill, I think, of a producer. Sometimes like you have like a crew member that, might be like a bad apple, or, you're dealing with a, executive or whoever that might be difficult. I don't know, there's like a grace that might be required to handle some of those situations, and like if you can handle those gracefully, that like you get called back for the next time. And then also like staying in touch and like really caring about like the people and like the work of like touching base and genuinely wanting to like see other people's careers grow. Like your career ends up growing kind of with them. Like there's something about worrying too much about that can also make it harder just to like focus on doing the job well. And if the job's done well, you'll kind of naturally get called again as well. Like I don't know, it's tough. Yeah, I don't know. I've been very lucky. I've been very lucky to have connected with filmmakers that I really love and admire, and we get to keep working together.
So what do you think it is about you as a producer, as an individual, that you think people respond to, keep responding to, and has kept you sort of in the conversation? This is a time where you get to compliment yourself. It's very hard.
I don't know. I mean, I think I get the job done. You know, at the end of the day, like, people can trust me to like make sure it happens, and like, you know, and I'll follow through and keep all the balls in the air and do all the juggling required. And I try to always do it with a smile on my face, and and to try to like have fun doing it. So I don't know. I guess that's part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. That's such a hard question.
It's a hard question. It's just a fun, like, reflective thing. I don't think there's like a right answer. I do like to ask the advice question, but I always like to make it, you know, specific, like to if someone who is listening and is 23 and maybe is in a completely different world than this world of producing production, like you were with choreography, even though now you can see that there were so many similarities. But if they're in this world that feels very far removed from this, and they look at you, they look at your Instagram and all the things you're doing and all the festivals and all the things, and they're like, wow, like she's amazing. Like, how do I take the steps to try to mirror the journey she's had, even though it'll be a different journey? What would your advice be for someone who looks at what you've created specifically?
I feel like it's like two kind of different things. One, I would say, watch a lot of content, and not like, you know, watching all the HBO shows, but like go onto Vimeo, watch staff picks, watch like go into Kickstarter and look at like what people are like making, and people that are also just starting out, or and see what you like. See if there is a filmmaker that particularly speaks to you. Like maybe they did a tiny little short that for whatever reason, like you really connect with, and reach out to that person. Like don't be afraid to, like just like tweet at them, or if you can find out like where they're working, or you know, like if you might have a mutual friend, see if you can reach out and just have coffee with them and just say like, I really admire your work and let me know how I can help. That is like such a great way. I can't tell you how many times like that's worked with me, of just like people, this like DP that just shot this short that I directed. He reached out to me like 6 or 7 years ago just because he saw one of my dance films online and really liked it. And he was like, can we just get coffee? He had just moved back to LA. I had coffee with him. I pitched him on a couple projects, and then like 7 years later hired him to like shoot this short that like looks gorgeous, and he did such a great job figuring out what you like, and not like the stuff that's like really big, but the stuff that's like being made that's like small. Like who are the people that like you would vibe with just on like a kind of creative level, and that's I think a way to start like creating your tribe, because you're immediately looking at like, cool, like this is someone that's making work that I want to make. And that is a great way. And then not taking no for an answer. And I think this is like always like, it's like a really delicate thing, because I've also had some people like use this against me and like in not a like good way. But you know, one of my first features that I ever produced and directed was made because like I just didn't take no for an answer. Like I reached out to like all these different companies to see if they would like finance it, and I kept on hearing no, and there was this one company that I just knew would be interested if I could just get to the right person, who was the CEO of the company. And I talked to the head of marketing. Who told me no. I talked to all these people. And so I just started, after being told no by the head of marketing of the company, I just started guessing at what the CEO's email address was. Mm-hmm. And I tried first name, last name. I tried like first initial, you know, like I just like tried whatever I could. And eventually I didn't get a bounce back. He read the email, got excited about the project and said, I'm looping in my head of marketing to make this work. And they ended up financing the project.
Was the head of marketing oh, hi again?
She just kind of ignored that anything had happened. But because that company hopped on board, then a bunch of other companies hopped on board and the whole thing got financed.
Amazing.
And so like there's something to the like tenacity and like persistence that is important, but there's also a way to do it politely. Like I've had some people just like reach out to me and say, hey, I want to have a meeting. And I'm like, okay, great. Like I'm not available this month. I'm literally working 14-hour days, but like, let's look at next month. And then they'll get like angry at me for not being available to meet. They're like, you told me to not take no for an answer. And I'm like, but like, there's also a way to politely do that and to like also recognize people's, you know, time and constraints. So anyway, but don't take no for an answer. Don't be afraid to like to reach out to people and also like offer your services, like see how you can help. I worked a lot for free just like because I just like wanted to like learn the industry and then people will eventually start paying you to do it.
Yeah. I think that that's that thing you're talking about, the finesse of reaching out, having the grace, knowing when to push, knowing when to pause is a skill that is not often talked about.
Yeah.
And it's something that you only learn by doing. No one can teach you. And you have your own, each person has their own brand of like how they navigate those conversations and how they present themselves and how often you follow up and how to not be annoying and like perception and reading tone. Like that is such like to speak to social skills to me. That's like, it is an art form.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, I want the person to give me the yes. So how do I navigate this tactfully with grace to get that yes somehow?
Yeah.
And it's just so hard to explain that to people.
Yeah. It's such a delicate fine line.
Yeah.
And being top of mind is like so important in this industry. And like, just like, because like, you know, we're constantly having tons of different meetings and like meeting constantly new people and there's different projects and different, filmmakers that it's hard to cut through the noise. And so being top of mind for like whatever position, whether you're a costume designer or an editor or a director, whatever it is, it's like important to stay top of mind with like someone that you're trying to work with. But there's like a way to do it tactfully. And what I found is that it's, you know, reaching out once every couple months and just like checking in and being like, hey, I just want to check in. And if you're able to like see what they've got going on and like maybe they just had a film release or maybe they just had a baby or like whatever it is, give them a congratulations.
Yeah.
If you have something new going on in your life or like that your project just did something like, hey, just wanted to let you know that this script that I sent you just became a finalist in this competition. Hope you're well. Congrats on Sundance. Whatever it is. It's not even necessarily asking for anything. It's just like a check-in. Yeah, it's hard because it's a long game, and I think people get frustrated with how long sometimes it can take. But like you have to be willing to put in that time and to stick it out. But if you do, it will pay off so much. But like it is like, it requires patience.
Yeah. I mean, that is the caca, and hence the title of my podcast is like that is the stuff that people don't talk about, that part of it, of how long it takes and sort of little mini bricks that you're laying to build a bridge to where you want to go. And sometimes you look back and you're like, man, I've been doing all this heavy lifting. I don't feel like I've done anything. But then one day it clicks into place and it's like, all of that made sense and all of it culminates and you're like, oh, like it's like Steve Jobs once said, you know, you can only connect the dots looking backwards. And you're like, had I not emailed that person 9 years ago,
exactly,
I would not
like, but those things, it's like, it's so real. I mean,
so
and
true.
like, and each of those things is like planting a seed, and like not all the seeds will sprout, but like when one of them does, and then all of a sudden it's a tree, like it's crazy.
And gotta
like,
be watering that garden.
Yeah.
You gotta water that garden all the time. Yeah. Sometimes it feels like you're in a drought. but and this is the other thing I'll say is that sometimes people come into your life at a time when your garden is in full bloom and they think it's like that all the time. And they're like, oh, like you just walked in and it was like this. Yeah. And I don't know much about gardening, so my garden metaphors are not great. And a lot of my friends are like,
this is great. I'm like, I'm so in it with you.
Yeah. They're like, stop using garden metaphors because like caca and fertilizer, it's like whatever. But no, it's like, and sometimes it's like, oh, but you haven't seen the years where nothing happened and there was like just weeds and I had to pull them out and I was like crying.
There's no overnight success.
There's
like
no overnight.
literally doesn't exist.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
like every single person, and I've been, you know, close to like to those people who everyone perceives as an overnight success, and it's like I have seen the work that has gone into it, and yeah, it's like this like weird myth in Hollywood that you just like, there's like this discovery and this thing, but like you have to be willing to like work the craft. You have to be willing to like do and like test, and like because all of that hard work, even on like the projects that feel like they don't matter, that work and those skills that you're honing are going to end up making you that much better for the project that does matter. And like and you had to do all those other projects
to get there. Yep.
Yeah.
It's perfect. It's so true. Well, I don't even know what else to say, because I feel like you crushed it. You said all the things.
Go see Greener Grass in theaters on October 18th.
Yay! Yes, please. Go see it. And then let us know what you thought of it.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. And that's this week's episode. Thank you guys for listening. Every week, again and again, you're tuning in, you're listening, you're rating, you're reviewing, you're subscribing, you're commenting. It means the world to me. I love doing this live thing with you guys. Almost ran out of breath there. I hope you do too. I'd love to hear from you. Hit me up. I'm at Carolina Groppa. The show's at Life with Kaka. Thanks again for tuning in and spending this time with me. I'll see you next week. Beijos.